Hello, I'm that Rob Human, and I'm showcasing version 3 of Arcanigen, the node-based vector graphics art tool that I've rewritten recently. A couple people have requested a bit of a video tour of not only all the nodes and what they do, but just the general how do you use this. Fair warning, I don't script these, so I'm just going to sit here and talk for a little while. The first video here that you're watching now is just going to be a brief overview, kind of the basics on getting started. The second video will probably be a tour of each individual node or thematically similar nodes. Probably not going to dive into every single one. The third video is probably going to be an explanation on custom nodes using subgraphs and how that gets handled. And the fourth video, if I have sufficient spoons, will be me making a circle from start to finish based off of one from the internet that I really like. So without further ado, this is the state of the program when you first load up. You've got your initial design that comes when you refresh the page. So navigation basics. Hold down middle mouse and drag, and you can move the canvases around. You can click drag to select. If you hold down control or shift, you can select multiple nodes at a time or add to a selection more accurately. If you hold down control and shift, it's an intersection. So like I just want these two out of this. For example, if I have these three and I would just want to have these two. There's another selection mode here, which is Shift Alt, which toggles anything within the bounding box. So those are your selection modes. Let's see what else here. I can double click a node title to give it a title of my own, or I can clear it out just to get it back to the default. You can collapse a node down just to, have it take up less room. That's pretty much it. To add a node, I can just click and drag from here, or I can just click and it'll bring it onto the play field here. And with certain nodes, like this layer, I can actually drag it onto a link and it will interject itself into the graph, like so. Click and drag on a socket to another socket, connects them. There's a couple different data types in here, so like integer. If you hover over the socket, you'll see what types they take. This one takes length. There's a couple other ones in here that take up special things, so like switch case is a good example. The output is unknown until you solidify it by connecting something. So now this will output a shape because it's a shape here. Or if you connect it to a given input, it will actually solidify your inputs to be shape because now you've connected something to the shape. So hovering over the sockets will tell you kind of what they expect. And some things can take multiple kinds of sockets, like the addition nodes. They can take, this can take an angle or a float or an integer or a length, and it will always output the same. And they collapse depending on what you attach to it, but you'll get the hang of it, I'm sure. As you've already seen, you can kind of select what category of nodes you want to filter by in the node drawer here, and you can search by name or whatnot. Change the ordering, so if you want them in alphabetical or reverse alphabetical or group, which is the default. You can click and drag to change the size of the drawer or the size of either canvas. So if you want to work primarily here and just kind of have that off in the corner, that's cool. The basic navigation stuff. The only other thing I will point out here is this little button. If you click and drag, it will not select partially selected nodes, you have to actually encapsulate the entire node to have it selected. This toggles that, so now if it intersects with a node, it'll consider it selected. That's just if you prefer one style or the other. Also, changelog, all the recent stuff that I've done just to kind of keep track of what's being added to the app and what build version we're on and whatnot, just for your own record keeping sake. Or if you're curious. A couple other things that I'm going to throw in here. There's a special kind of node called a container. It always sits behind other nodes, but you can kind of drag it and maybe give it a color. And when you click on it and drag it, it will carry other nodes along with it. So it's a nice way to just kind of keep things grouped and organized. And then obviously the note, which is for if you want to leave a comment for yourself, that's a good way to do it. So getting stuff onto the canvas, there is this special node here called the result, and anything that gets piped into this input socket will show up in the canvas. And you can change the size of the canvas to whatever you would like, or if you want to change the background color, you can do that too. Or you can say transparent. Oop. And it'll be see-through. I'm going to keep it white because that's just easiest. Or you can offset the entire thing on the X or Y to your heart's content. But yeah, you're probably just going to be messing with the canvas, the background, or the canvas size and the background color. So, but this is where everything gets plugged in. That's pretty much the basics as far as, getting around the app and navigating the app. If you don't watch the second video, because it's going to be fairly long, let's actually go ahead and take this polygon, and I'll run down some of the features and common conventions that I'll have here. I'm actually going to pull in a star in a minute for that as well. How you change the appearance of nodes and whatnot, and then I'll go through a couple of the basic, I'll say, useful nodes. They're not necessarily basic, they're actually quite advanced, but ones that I'm sure in most designs will see a lot of use. So this is the polygon node, and this is the one that produces this triangle in the middle. In fact, I'm going to just bypass this layer so you can just see the triangle directly. I'm actually going to delete that. Cool. So we're dealing with this polygon, and I can change the number of points in the polygon, so now it's a pentagon, or I can do a septagon. I can change the radius. And, I'm actually going to bring that circle back for a very good reason. Bear with me. Okay, so I'm going to change this to a pentagon. You'll see that we have this scribe mode, which is inscribe, middle, or circumscribe. Inscribe means that the radius listed here is the distance between from the center to a point. You can change that mode to circumscribe, so that way it is the 100 pixels, goes from the center of the pentagon to the edge, or what is technically called the apophthegm. So that's what that mode does, and you can see the difference compared to this 100 pixel radius circle. If I pop open this more tab here, you got a couple options for corner radius. So like if I change this to 25, you'll see that the corners get rounded over on this pentagon. Or I can change this to bevel for this corner shape. There's a couple other options like scoop, which is the inverse of angle, and then notch, which looks a little weird on a pentagon, but if I actually change this to a diamond, you'll see that it's almost like if you cut into the corner instead. It's probably not that useful, but it was easy to program in, so I did. And then cut actually removes the entire corner bit, and that is particularly useful for another node type, which we'll get to in the next episode. But yeah, so I'm actually going to kill that corner radius, so we're back to zeros. Markers is a way, in fact, let me actually take this as a polygram here. Change this to 5 with a skip of 1. Don't worry about if this doesn't make sense to you. I'm just making a shape. Markers basically says, you can put a shape at the vertices of another shape. You can toggle on the align markers, and you'll see that they all kind of faced outwards or are tangent to the shape at those points. Some shapes have a markers in general. Some shapes have a marker start and a marker end. Some have all three, so like general marker, start, and end. That's all on a case-by-case basis. I'm going to kill that polygram now. If I tab open this appearance tab, this is basically where all the stylings happen. So like I could change the stroke color to red or maybe green. I can change the width of the stroke. I can change, well, stroke cap is a little hard to show off in this particular shape, so I'll get back to that. You'll see that the strokes come to a corner, a very sharp corner, and that's your miter stroke join. You can change that to bevel, and it kind of chops off the edge, or you can change it to round, and it kind of smooths it over. Miter's the default, but bevel is a good one if you see that your strokes are kind of pointing out past, say, a circle like this. So like if I go back to 1 pixel, if I went to miter, you'll see, and it's more prevalent if I, you can just barely see it, a little sticking past the circle just a little bit. You can change that to bevel and it'll kind of chop it off. It's more noticeable on sharper shapes like the polygram. You'll see. The stroke dash is a bit of a weird one. This lets you basically turn your shape into a dashed shape. So the way this works is I can enter in one or more lengths, and say if I do 8 pixels, you'll see that it'll have a dash of 8 pixels and then a gap of 8 pixels. Or I could do, say, 8 pixels, 4 pixels, and that'll mean a dash of 8 pixels and then a gap of 4 pixels. Or I could do 1 inch. Let me actually change that to a 1/4 inch. There we go. And what that means is an 8 pixel dash, a 4 pixel gap, a 1/4 inch dash, and then a 1/4 inch gap. So it kind of repeats the last one until there's an even number of them. So you can repeat that as much as you want. Now that we have that, though, it might be easier to show off that stroke cap. You'll notice that this is fairly flat. If I change this to round, you'll see that it rounds over. And if there's a shape that has like an open end, this gets applied at the end of the stroke as well. Square is similar to butt, but it kind of extends past the point that it would normally. So like butt is flush with the end of the stroke. Square extends past it by the thickness of the stroke, and then round just rounds the corner over. You can also tweak the offset of the path. So like if you notice a corner that is not quite right, you can tweak where you want that to go. So like 1 pixel or -1 pixel, and it'll just kind of adjust the progression of the dashing. There we go. And fill is exactly what it sounds like. It's the fill color. You have the paint order, so it goes from bottom to top. So in this case, fill gets painted before stroke, which gets painted before markers. Or I could swap that, so like stroke gets painted before fill, gets painted before markers. You have all 6 options there. And then opacity is just a global opacity for that shape. Next tab down, you have transforms. You can just rotate the thing in place. That's your basic rotation. And for position, you have 2 variants of this. You have your Cartesian and your polar. Cartesian is, you want to offset this by 1 inch in the x direction and say 1/2 inch in the negative y direction. this is your Cartesian coordinates. Alternatively, you can switch this over to polar, and let's say 1 inch, and then you'll see it moved it 1 inch upwards. Well, if I want this to actually be 1 inch in the top right corner, I can change this to 45, and it, moves it that much in the 45-degree direction. If you're doing a lot of circular things, this is a lot more useful and intuitive than your XY coordinates, so you don't have to do your sine and cosine stuff yourself. And then lastly, for the polygon at least, and not every shape has this additional outputs, just as every shape doesn't necessarily have a fill because it's an open shape. The polygon has a circumradius and an apothem, and these are lengths that essentially let you define the radius of another shape. And if I didn't set the fill, that would be useful. There we go. Let's actually reset this. This is ugly. There we go, and get rid of the dashing as well. Cool. Okay, there we go. So you'll see that the apothem, this circle is set to be the same radius as the apothem of this polygon, meaning it's always tangent to the edges. So I could change the radius of this, and the circle comes along for the ride. Similarly, I can take the circumradius, and that's just going to encapsulate the polygon, and say I want to do 125. Again, it comes along for the ride. As I said, different shapes will have different additional outputs, but that just happens to be the one for the polygon. There you go. A note on these different modes as well, and I'm going to come in here and use this star instead of the polygon. I've got this set up so that certain shapes have kind of two modes to parameterize them. For the star, that's like the outer radius and the inner radius. So like I've got this outer radius set to 150 pixels, and then the inner radius I can set to 25 pixels. So that's, let me just throw another circle in here at 25 pixels just to showcase this. There you go. You'll see that the points on this star are at 25 pixels. Now, again, that comes with the same circumscribe, middle, and inscribe modes, but there's also this spread mode, and the way that works is I can set a base radius of 100 pixels, and you'll notice that it doesn't line up with 100 pixels either way. And that is because the outer radius is the radius listed here plus half of the spread. So if I set the spread to 20, or perhaps, we'll keep it at 50. And if I set this outer circle to be 125, that now lines up again. So it's radius plus half of spread, and the inner radius becomes radius minus half of spread. And then there's also this spread align parameter. And what that does is it basically says center, meaning the outer and inner is half of the spread. Or you can do inward, where the outer radius is the radius, and the inner radius is the radius minus the spread. And then outward does the outer radius is the radius plus the spread, and the inner radius is just the radius. I'm probably over-explaining this. Play with it. I'm sure you'll get the hang of it. It's not that bad. And similarly, your star has your corner radii, or whatnot. And in this case, you can actually control them separately for the star. Different shapes have different parameters in there, but most of them behave that way. You'll see more in the second video. So other things that I'm sure people will be happy to know about. One thing I expect to come up a lot is repetition. So I'm going to show you this one particular array, or this shape, this node called polygon array. And let's set this to 100. And the way that the arrays work is it basically says, given a virtual polygon, in this case with 5 points and a radius of 100, you want to distribute shapes to each of the vertices. So you'll see that there are 5 because there's 5 points on here. I could change this to 7, and it distributes those shapes one at each vertex. It's similar to markers, but it actually gives you a lot more control. And you got your typical outputs and whatnot. The other thing that I think is actually powerful that I will mention here is that there's also a sequence output, and all the arrays have these, as well as I think a couple other things. And the sequencer takes that as an input. So let me just hook this up. I'm going to go back to an output of 5, or a count of 5 points. And the way that this works, I'm going to break this connection here, and I'm going to wire this output back into the input. The way that this works is you can essentially give the sequencer a different shape per vertex. So again, we have 5 vertices, but now you can have, step 0, which is this top one, gets a circle. The second one gets a triangle. And there's only 2 steps, right? So that means it's going to repeat. So it's circle, triangle, circle, triangle, circle. If I went to 6, you would have the same repetition here. There are some options there to kind of determine how you want to have that behave. I would suggest playing around with it. But basically, the sequencer lets you plug in different values on each iteration of an array, each member of an array. There's a couple different nodes that do this. Again, I'm going to refer you to the second video once that comes out to explain the ins and outs of how that works in detail, but as a just getting started, these are probably going to be your biggest tools, is the polygon array, the circle, and then your basic shapes. So, join me in video 2.